So this is all about computers meeting manuscripts. I'm representing, besides myself, my partner in crime, Lior, with whom I've been collaborating for about 10 years, and Adiel, Ben-Shalom. And about 10 or more, a dozen master students who've been involved over the years. So texts can be on papyrus, they can be on ostraca, they can be on skin or in books. And this is a meeting about paleography, so the big questions are when was something written, where, who. You can tell me when this was written if you recognize it. And it seems to me that it's all about similarity and difference. You have here two twins. They're both similar, but their mother can tell them apart. And this is the same thing. Letters may be similar, but you want to tell them apart. And over these 10 years, we've worked primarily with these collections, the Cairo Genizah, which most of what I'll be telling you about, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we've been working on for the last 5 years, Elephantine. We've worked with a lot with Tibetan Buddhist scholars on Tibetan texts and manuscripts, and with Peter on English, and a smattering of Coptic, Bengali, Chinese. I had to include the Coptic because of the title of this meeting. So we're looking to look at texts, look at images of text, where you can see the shape of the letters, and ask questions like, can we match the style of the letters, who wrote them, and things like that. Talking about twins, these two twins sort of discovered or rediscovered the Cairo Genizah when they went from Cambridge to Egypt, and in the marketplace were offered this text over there, which they realized was in Hebrew, but didn't know exactly what it was. I'm not going to tell you all about it. It turned out that in the attic of this old synagogue, there was a room full of discarded manuscripts. And Solomon Schechter brought them back to Cambridge and sat with these boxes, as you can see, for the rest of his working life. And they're exciting manuscripts like this by Maimonides, and this with a little bit of Arabic on top, and Judeo-Arabic after that, and nice text like this. And here some kid must have talked in class because he had to write 100 times that silence is gold and so on. And over the last few years, everything that was found there has been digitized. And this is the Genizah project. A philanthropist paid for the digitization. And so now we have questions like, can we use the computer to take these tens of thousands of images and sort them and classify them and so on? So tell languages apart, that should be relatively easy, but can we tell the different styles of writing, square, cursive, and so on? And better yet, can we do paleographic analysis? Where do they come from? Which are from North Africa, which are from Europe? So there's a standard set of books by Malachi Betaye and others giving medieval Hebrew manuscripts with dated texts, and we use that book to take the styles of the letters and see if we can have the computer classify in the same way. And as you can see by the dark diagonal, the computer more or less found the same, clustered the text into the same 20 clusters as in the book, except for there's one case there where things are mixed. But there's part of the problem that I'm interested in discussing with the paleographers among us is for the computer to say these two are similar doesn't help the paleographer. So why are they similar? The computer says, well, here's the similarity function of these two vectors multiplied by that gives you this, doesn't help anybody. So one of the things we try to do is give samples of letters. Here, these letters look the same as these letters maybe look different. This is why I think these two are the same, these two are different. And in some more human-like way, present the results to the scholar. So that's a question that we need to deal with. We've been working with Tibetan, as I said, and so the Tibetan scriptures are several hundred volumes, and the Kadam in particular is 30 volumes. And anyway, we worked with that. Let me see, they were found in a cave. Not many manuscripts are found in a cave and so on. But anyway, so now what do we do with this? We want the computer to do this, cluster the manuscripts. Unlike many other languages, there's almost no paleographic, well, there's like one book about paleography of Tibetan, so that doesn't help too much. There's a big distinction between those that have a headline and those that don't. And we asked the computer to cluster them. Here's some examples this is cluster number 3 and how similar they are or not, and to sort of classify the different styles. And these are examples of things that are far apart, not the same style. I said that we did a little work here with Peter on paleography. I want to mention this because this is not what we usually do. Here we looked at features that paleographers use. Everything else we'll talk about are features that computers use, that were used for facial recognition or for other computer tasks, and something that is totally meaningless to the paleographer, as opposed to in these experiments where, at least here we can tell something to the paleographer that they'll understand. So we took, this is late Old English or something, and took these texts, and the 289 features and mentions there, like whether it's a Caroline S or something like that, are features that paleographers are used to. And they tag text, and we can use that information. So what we did is to take that information and try to analyze not just have the computer try to guess the provenance based on these human-tagged features, but also to understand which are the important features. So we used first information gain, which tells you for each feature, each descriptor, like angle, tongue, ash, that's the AE thing, whether how important it was to the classification here into provenance. But more important is then use something that's used in biology, gene set enrichment analysis, to look at a cluster of features, like the features of a particular letter, and say that this letter is significant for determining the provenance or other paleographic aspects. And what the paleographers, okay, so in this case, the letter or the symbol that ranked second supposedly was the surprise to paleographers, because this nota thing, which is like an ampersand, and other things, the computer just felt that they were useless because even within the same region, they vary too much. That was one experiment. The thing that was most successful, I would say, among the things that we've been doing, is finding joins in the Genizah Cairo collection. So this is a different example. This is the Book of the Dead, where this fellow went to Australia and saw in some dusty museum this little thing here, and he remembered that's the missing piece from this European copy, Book of the Dead. Stick it in there and join the two together. This is something that we'd like to do in general. So in this Cairo Genizah that I described, you saw the room full of discarded manuscripts. You have pieces, fragments, you have pages apart, and sometimes one page is torn, but more often you have many pages that came from the same original, but today they may even be in different libraries. In Geneva, there were 2 boxes that were forgotten for 100 years, and open it up and is the remainder of some work in some other library in Cambridge or in New York or someplace else. So this is things that scholars do, but some scholars, remember, oh yes, 4 years ago, like we saw this other guy saw something in Paris that looked similar. So this was a few years ago, so we're using neural network technology, which is what we did, and I decided no technical details for lack of time, and I'll be happy to elaborate later. So in particular, because we had the computer try to match up each one with another, see that they looked like they were written by the same person or belonged to the same work. And because this 2 boxes from Geneva were new and they were about to be published, the first thing we had the computer do is look for matches for these new pages with known things, and they stopped, held up because some of the matches were important. And it turned out among the top matches that the computer found between things that were in different locations completely, they were correct joins, which is quite good. All right, so I'm skipping the technical details. The computer looks at the histogram of angles, of gradients, whatever, and things like that, compares it to some sampler table, and decides that they're similar or not similar. And so it found here this page in Pennsylvania matches this one in Geneva. I told you we're interested in Geneva. Geneva matches this other page in Haifa, but also this little fragment, tiny little piece in Manchester matches Cambridge, and so on. Many Geneva with Jerusalem, Paris with Paris, but still this was not known. And even lost things, like this page in Geneva matched something in New York that was known to have been written by a famous scholar of the 10th century, Sadia, and in Judeo-Arabic, and was able to find another page of this lost text. Then we had the computer run everything against everything. We took half the computers in our department and dedicated it to run, take the 160,000 images that we had at the time and compare everyone with everyone, and not compare the image, but compare the descriptors of the image. And okay, this reached the New York Times, and what we now have is that when you go to the website of the Genizah text, and the scholar is interested in this thing on the left, the computer says, you might also be interested in some of these others, like they're trying to sell you another manuscript. And often, I mean, people, every time I meet a scholar, they say, they found something. So there was an interesting case where it didn't match the one they were looking at, but two of the ones on the right matched each other, which was important enough. So even though they didn't quite match the third, they were similar enough. Now, the computer, we wrote a paper about re-ranking the results based on the scholar's decision. Yes, this is a good match or a bad match, but that's not part of the website. All right, another thing we spend time on is word spotting, where you're not trying to read, but you're looking for something that looks similar, visually similar. So again, I decided to skip all the technical details and just tell you what I think we can do with it. So, okay, so the computer looks at what we call candidate patches. We're looking for a match for a word. On the bottom right there is George Washington's letter, but it doesn't matter. So we're looking for a word, like orders over there, and we want to compare it with possible words in a text. So we take this text, this is in Tibetan, and we don't know how to divide words or something. So then we encode them all, again, not important in the histogram of gradients and other techniques, make a vector represent the word, stretch all the words to be the same size, compare the words, the description of the query word, the one on top, opportunity, with any of the possible word breaks in the text. Okay, so here's a Hebrew word for a printed text. That's not interesting, but here's for our manuscript. They're not all right, but more than half are right. So this can be used for content words, looking for significant words, like you're looking for a medical text or a magical text. You might look for specific terms. Here's an example. Again, this was part of the Genizah website where the word there means peace, hashalom, and look for it in the text. So you take a word out of one manuscript and say, can you find me any similar occurrences of the word? So here it's looking for words that are similar, so it won't find every occurrence of the word, it'll only find those that are visually similar. Or here in Arabic, and here in Bengali, and so on. All right, so now the same thing you use to look for words, you might use for looking for letters. And then we want to use this in order to cluster letters. So it's not easy because different manuscripts, these are from the Dead Sea Scrolls, might look different. But anyway, try to isolate letters. And then build a descriptor for each letter, and then try to match them. So we did some experiments looking for relatively distinctive letters here, like the lamed and with the flag on top and the aleph. So here, these are all right, almost. I don't know about the ones on the bottom row. I'll look for these letters, almost all right. So now we can do this also to do paleography. And let's take each column here is from a different manuscript, and then you have another manuscript, you look at the letters and see which of the letters in this table of letters it matches best. And we did some experiments on those lines, but a simple experiment like taking a letter from a manuscript and see if it matches that manuscript, which it does. Do the same kind of thing with Tibetan. Here's a good example of that letter. This is almost perfect, but some letters are hard, like that one. This one is ridiculous. But anyway, you can take the letters and try to cluster them, like here. And so these are the same letter now. That's separating, try to find all the occurrences of one letter. Now you take all the occurrences of a particular letter and to try to find differences in the style of that letter. So the colors here are the different documents, and see if you can distinguish documents. So here the red are pretty good by themselves, but all the others are mixed up. Okay. But so that just means that you can't tell the manuscripts apart just by looking at this one letter, perhaps, but you can combine it with other letters, which may work. Okay, so Greek is one of the languages here, so there's an example, or Coptic, which we did work with a little bit, so here's clustering of a Coptic letter. Okay, and here I took the folder and, to all the images. These look pretty good. Maybe this too. Okay, my wife reads Coptic, but I don't, so here you go. Not just looking for letters and clustering letters, but what might be important on these scribal flourishes, things that are idiosyncratic to a particular writer, so if you look for something that matches them visually, that might be important. So it's something worth doing. This is chapter mark, and these are from Tibetan flourishes of some sort. We haven't tried really to do this yet, but this is what one should do, I think. Getting to the Dead Sea Scrolls, we've been working on for a while. I guess they're supposedly cousins, supposedly found. So, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Working on this project mainly with Göttingen, but also with Jerusalem and Haifa. It's not mainly Jerusalem, which has the images, Haifa, which has the scholars, Göttingen, which has the lexicon, and so I tried to put together this project for the Dead Sea Scrolls with texts and images and putting them together. And what we'd like to, so one purpose is to help scholars put together digital scholarly editions and manipulate the fragments and play with puzzles, but just move things around on the computer. Some people are very good at that. But what we've been doing is partly processing the images, but what we're trying to do now is to match the text to the image. So put each letter, we have transcriptions of almost everything, try to match them up letter for letter. Okay, so sort of like you have here, take the text, this is in the cryptic script, and match them to these papyrus fragments and put them in the right place. Well, let me tell you about some, okay, I don't want to tell you about especially since the PDF is missing everything on the right. And finally, okay. So I wanted, that was just in the move, okay. About some experiments that we did that we published that may be interesting, but one of the things, we asked the computer to take a broken letter, a fragmentary letter, and try to see how it can be filled out, what possible readings are for this broken letter. I'm afraid to touch this. Okay, so we use neural networks for this to guess the adjacent pixel, to predict a pixel one at a time. You have half of a letter, predict the next one, based having trained it on all kinds of broken letters that we created artificially. And so using something called pixels RNN or pixel CNN. And so I'm again skipping the details. But important thing was to break letters in different directions. So we took the scroll, the Psalm scroll from the Dead Sea, the 11Q5, took its letters, sort of extracted the letters that we can using this word spotting that I spoke about before, and then take the good letters and cut pieces, take broken samples of edges from elsewhere and sort of put it on top of the good letters, and learn how to fill out letters. So that's what we did. We masked part of the letters to give broken letters, trained it, and get some results. At least this is an objective way. The computer suggested what the possible completions are, and then so the scholar doesn't only have what he thinks ought to be written there in mind, but also knows what other possible completions make sense. Okay, and here's an example where it can matter. This is the famous Passover papyrus from Elephantine. What that last letter on the left is makes a big difference, okay? My son wrote a paper about that, so. Okay. So I'm just going to mention, in 1 minute I have left, other things we're trying to do, which is, I said we're trying to align the image with the text and use techniques, like this is sift flow, to bring them together. So what we did is take the transcription, render it in some font that's as similar as we have to the text itself. Here's the Dead Sea Scroll. So the top is the text, the middle is the rendering, and in some pseudo font that's close, and then have the computer change one to the other. All right, so we did this for various texts. English, Greek, Tibetan, German, etc. Okay, we'd like the computer, again, to learn from corrections that the scholar does. This is work with Daniel Stockel, Ben Ezra, and he's doing this with medieval Mishnaic texts and the like. Okay, so I'm out of time, so just saying other things that we do. We work low resource OCR, like on Tibetan, where we don't have many texts to use to train from. Learn it by using recent methods of augmentation, having the computer take texts, make sort of manuscripts out of them and distort them as much as possible, and then train. And even if the OCR is not perfect, it may help us do other things, like align the text, even if the OCR is not perfect. And there are all kinds of physical things that are not part of paleography that we spend a lot of time doing, which I wasn't intending to tell you about. And since I believe on Thursday there's some papyrus meeting, I left all the papyrus talk for those discussions. And thank you very much.